companion of the Prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, Abdullah ibn Abbas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, recited the Quran, Surah Zukhraf, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإنه لعلم للساعة, meaning Jesus, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, he is the sign of the last hour. When you recite the Quran like that, it becomes plain and clear. The only way that Jesus, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, could be the sign of the last hour is if we accept what Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam said, that he came and he left and he will return. How do we explain what the most eminent scholar of this age, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fadl Rahman Ansari, in his Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society, he has written, it's there in black and white, and he's my teacher, that the return of Nabi Isa alayhi salam is only a prophecy of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, indicating he could not find in the Quran any evidence to support the view that Jesus will come back. Let me repeat that. My teacher of blessed memory, and he was not the only one, many other eminent scholars, Sheikh al-Azhar. Remember, I want an answer from you. You can't go back home silently. You must give me an answer. How do we explain Sheikh al-Azhar, two of them, giving a fatwa? Jesus is dead. He's not coming back. Sheikh al-Azhar, the most important institution of Islamic learning in the world. Jesus is dead. He's not coming back. Muhammad Asad, an important scholar of Islam of the modern, Jesus is dead. He's not coming back. My teacher, that it is only a prophecy of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu, nothing in the Quran to support it. How do we explain this? And maybe we are at the tip of the iceberg, that tomorrow will come when a new wave of scholarship will come and sweep us away, embedding in the minds of people, Jesus is dead, he's not coming back. Now show me in the Quran, where's the proof? What will you do on that day? Prepare yourself. The reason why Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fadl Rahman Ansari, and so many eminent scholars of Islam came to the conclusion there's nothing in the Quran to support the return of Jesus is because the Tashkeel, which recites the Quran, is وَإِنَّهُ لَعَلَمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ. He, Jesus, he is the sign of the last hour, therefore he's coming back. Is not to be found in any copy of the Quran today. Now, unless you have a PhD in stupidity, apparently some people do have that PhD, you will know that when the Quran came down, it came down in the world of sound. It did not come down as a written document. And when the scribes recorded what the Prophet ﷺ was reciting to them, they would have to read it. So he will be confirming something he's hearing. He never gave us a written copy of the Quran confirmed by him because he couldn't read it. And there were no Tashkeel in the original copies of the Quran. No diacritical marks, no fatha, no kasra. Up to now you can see them. The Arabs did not need Tashkeel. The Tashkeel or the diacritical marks, Fatha, Kesra, and Dhamma, were inserted long years later when non-Arabs were becoming Muslims and they needed help. And I have no problem with that. It's beneficial, it helps us. Once you recognize that the Tashkeel are not a part of the Quran. What can I do with the people who have PhDs in stupidity and who argue with me that Tashkeel are a part of the Quran? They are hopeless people. Hopeless people. I don't know what to do. If the Tashkeel did not come with Allah's messenger, with the Jibreel alayhi salam, if the Tashkeel were put in by human beings, then we can say something is wrong here. Because every single copy of the Quran you pick up today has Tashkeel inserted by human beings, which does not say innahu la'alamun lissar, it says innahu la'ilmun lissar. They accept innahu la'ilmun lissar, and they say this is part of the Quran. And if you say this is a mistake, Imran, then we accuse you of saying that there is a mistake in the Quran. Wait for Judgment Day with that nonsense. You'll have to stand up before Allah because I will ask for justice. If you accuse me of saying there's a mistake in the Quran, you'll have to provide the evidence. Wait for Judgment Day. They do more than that. I say this is wrong. This Tashkeel is wrong. No one had the courage to say it before me, but I'm saying it. If you say that he is the knowledge of the hour, that's the meaning. Innahu la'ilmun lissa'ar means he is the knowledge of the hour. If I'm wrong, correct me now. If I'm wrong, correct me now. Innahu la'ilmun lissa'ar means he is the knowledge of the hour. Good. The Quran has two kinds of verses. Where does Allah say so?
Surah Al-Imran.
That's right. Who said it? MashaAllah. Surah to Ali Imran. 2, not 3, 2. Ayat muhkamat. These are verses which are plain and clear. He is the knowledge of the hour, is plain and clear. And Allah says about these verses, this is Ummul Kitab. These are the very heart of the Quran. But in His wisdom, Allah also gave us a second kind of ayat. Ayat mutashabihat, meaning, what does it mean? Answer, an ayah mutashabihah is an ayah which has to be interpreted in order to be understood. When Allah said this, He meant that. The classical example, this is what should be taught in a Darul room. It's not being taught. When Allah said, eat and drink in the nights of Ramadan until the white thread of dawn is distinct from the black thread. Nowhere in the world, I can't speak for Durban, but nowhere in the world do anybody put a black thread and a white thread below their pillow. Do they do it in Durban? Huh? But that's what is in the Quran. Eat and drink until the white thread of dawn is distinct from the black thread. Then you begin the fast. So a man put a black thread and a white thread under his pillow, a companion, and in the morning he had difficulty, so he went to the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. It was at that time, and not before, that the Prophet ﷺ then gave not an explanation, no. He gave an interpretation, ta'wil. That when Allah said this, he meant that. That is ta'wil. That is an ayah mutashabihah. When Allah said white thread and black thread, what he meant was eat and drink until the light of the day is clearly distinct from the darkness of the night. At that time, you must stop eating. They can already do their nonsense in the masjid. They probably already finished with their Salatul Fajr in the masjid. But you are allowed to keep on eating by the Quran until the light of the day is clearly distinct from the darkness of the night. My duty is to teach you the Quran, regardless if I'm going to be crucified for it. My duty is to teach the Quran. Good. So I've given you the classical example of an ayah mutashabihah. When I interpret the Quran, it's different from the Prophet. He interprets the Quran on the basis of knowledge he gets from Allah. When we interpret the Quran, only Allah can confirm that an interpretation is correct. Where does Allah say that? Same ayah, Ali Imran. Only Allah can confirm that an interpretation is correct. Same ayah from Surah Ali Imran, okay? So we say Allah knows best when we interpret the Quran. So an ayah mutashabihah does not have the same status as Ummul Kitab. All right? So you have to have a PhD in linguistic acrobatics to take an ayah muhkamah and transform it into an ayah mutashabihah, which is what, unfortunately, Maulana Abul Ala Maududi did, rahimahullah. I'm not speaking ill of the learned Maulana. I show respect for this man. These are great scholars of Islam. But if you take an ayah muhkamah, which is what he did, and transform it into an ayah mutashabihah, I have to call a spade, no matter who you are. So when they say, إِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ, which is what every single copy of the Quran today says, no copy of the Quran follows Abdullah ibn Abbas. None. I've never seen any copy of the Quran following Abdullah ibn Abbas. Everyone follows this bogus Tashkeel. إِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ. He, Jesus, is the knowledge of the hour. If you say he is the knowledge of the hour, then people who have common sense will recognize the implications. That if he is the knowledge of the hour, then you cannot escape the conclusion the knowledge of the hour is with him. If you say he is the knowledge of the hour, then the inescapable implication is that the knowledge of the hour is with him. But there are so many verses of the Quran in which Allah says that the knowledge of the hour is only with Allah. In consequence of which, if you say, إِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ, you will now have a contradiction in the Quran. And they recognize that. Maulana Abul Ala Maududi recognized that. Many others recognize that. So what do? They take an ayah muhkamah and they transform it into an ayah mutashabihah. And they say, when Allah said this, he meant that. When Allah said he is the knowledge of the hour, what Allah meant is he is the sign of the hour. And we say that's bogus thinking. Bogus thinking. We will not allow you to take an ayah muhkama, which is Kitab, and transfer it, sinfully so, and make it an ayah mutashabiha. So the correct way of reciting the Quran is innahu la'alamun lisa, the way Abdullah ibn Abbas recited it. If my teacher, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari rahimahullah, if he had read the Quran this way, innahu la'alamun lisa, he would never have written in his Quranic foundations that belief in the return of Jesus is only a prophecy. Meaning he could not find in the Quran any evidence supporting the view that Jesus will return. I want to write a book only devoted to this subject, so that on Judgment Day, that book will stand beside me. And all those who insist that innahu la ilmul lisa is the correct way to recite the Quran, all of them will have to stand on Judgment Day and answer before Allah on that subject. My warning to them. That's my answer to you. Yes.
Just to continue with that. So, is it from that point, especially when we talk with the Christians on this point, I mean with the interfaith, right? Then they will turn around and say, therefore, your Quran has problems because by using alam and ilm, you don't know which one it is, and because it changes the meaning also. So we argue with them that our Quran is authentic. Every letter, every word is authentic, because that's changing the meaning. I mean, from their perspective, that now you got this quandary because you are not.
Yeah.
The Quran didn't come down with the recitation, or because it changes the meaning.
Yeah.
So that's the first question. But
Before you turn to this, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
The fatha and the kasra and the dhamma is the problem here. It's called the Tashkeel.
Yes.
Is this a part of the Quran?
So
No, my answer is yes or no.
No, it's not.
It's not a part of the Quran. So when I tell the Christian that we unfortunately, the book of Allah, the Quran is untouched. It is authentic. There are no two Qurans, the book of Allah. But when human beings put in these diacritical marks, then evil people can get involved. And we admit, we accept, this is not from the Quran, this is additional, and this is a mistake. They will understand.
So
Number two.
From the original, without the fatha and dhamma.
There is no original written Quran. Forget that. The only original Quran is a Quran located in the world of sound. Written copies of the Quran came later. The codification of written copies of the Quran took place many years after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. So the written Quran is not important to us. That is not important to us. The Quran which came from us to Allah, from Allah to us, is not a written Quran. It is innahu la Quranun Kareem fi kitabin maknoon. Which surah? Which surah? Don't tell me Bilqis will have to answer this, eh? Surah Al-Waqiyah. فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ. I take an oath. This is the most important passage of the Quran for methodology for study of the Quran. And yet you will not find it in all the books of Usul al-Tafsir. Usul of Tafsir means methodology for study of the Quran. When I was a student in the institute established by Maulana Ansari himself, as a senior student, they gave us a textbook written by Shah Waliullah Dahlawi, a very famous scholar of Islam. Al-Fawzul Kabir fi Usul al-Tafsir. And that whole book has nothing to do with this pivotally important verse of the Quran. فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ. And I take an oath or a qasam by the positions in which the stars are located. وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَّمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ. And this is not any ordinary qasam or oath. This is the most supremely important of all qasam or oath. What? I take an oath by the positions in which the stars are located. إِنَّهُ لَقُرْآنٌ كَرِيمٌ. Surely this is a recitation which is noble and generous. Fi kitabin maknoon. And this recitation is in a book which is guarded and protected. The Quran is a recitation. So to tell me there were no copies of the Quran already established when the Prophet died, I say, I don't know where you got your PhD. Was it in Disneyland? Was it in Disneyland? We are not concerned with any written copy. Written copies can come when they want. The Quran was already memorized by many of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And that is the Quran. The Quran located in the world of sound. Okay? And that Quran had no Tashkeel. And that is the way Abdullah ibn Abbas recited the Quran. Go ahead.
Yes, so sorry, Prophet, because I'm in the field with the Christians. That's I'm engaged to their argument, counter-argument to that, which we agree. We all agree it was oral. So therefore, coming down, there was a difference now in the recitation of that ayah, sound-wise, alam and ilm, coming down. So how do we determine which?
I have already answered you. Were you here all the time while I was answering?
Yes,
I just explained with clarity. I just explained with clarity. Do I have to repeat what I have just said for half an hour? That if you recite the Quran as إِنَّهُ لَعِلْمُ اللِّسَانِ, and if you have 2 South African rands of common sense, that's all. There is a contradiction in the Quran. But it's a waste of time for me. I'll have to repeat it 100,000 times, and they still will stay with that recitation. I say, stay with it. Wait for Judgment Day if you do not have the capacity to think. If you recite the Quran, وَإِنَّهُ لَعِلْمُ اللِّسَانِ, how many times would I have to explain to you that you will have a contradiction in the Quran?
Sorry, Prof, we accept your point. I'm saying the Christian will tell us that among you Muslims,
I will accept. I will tell the Christian. I will tell the Christian I accept that we have evil people. I accept that we have evil people who have altered the Tashkeel. I accept it. I accept it. That in the same way you have bogus Tashkeel, you also have bogus Hadith. That our Prophet married a child.
Correct.
Our Prophet married a child. All you need is common sense, that's all. You don't need any intellectual sophistication to recognize that marriage with a 6-year-old child is bogus. When I say that, they shut the doors of the masjid on me, and my response is, go ahead. Shut the doors of the masjid on me, go ahead. But if I have the truth, if I'm explaining the Quran as the truth, this is what Allah's Messenger said. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْفَعُ بِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ أَقْوَامًا. Allah with this Quran will raise some people. وَيَدَعُ بِهِ آخَرِينَ. And other people are going to be brought down by this Quran. These are the words of our Prophet. So if I am explaining the Quran correctly, I don't have to lose any sleep. You can shut the doors of the masjid on me. The truth will survive. And I am confident that the methodology I got from my teacher was correct. The way to study the Quran is the way you study the stars. And you cannot study the verses of the Quran that way only with the rational faculty. You need more than the rational faculty. You need nur from Allah. And that nur, when it enters the heart, gives you something called basar. Basar. The model of scholarship in Akhir Zaman is not the model of Musa, alayhi salam. The model of scholarship in Akhir Zaman is the model of MashaAllah, Khidr alayhi salam. وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. And you find the most learned of all men not in a Darul Uloom. Where will you find the most learned? At Majma'ul Bahrain. And what is Majma'ul Bahrain? Is it muhkama or is it mutashabiha? Answer? It can't be Atlantic and Pacific. No, it is mutashabiha. And it is, what is it? Imam al-Baydawi, for example. Imam al-Baydawi. He says Majma'ul Bahrain is the coming together of ilm al-zahir and ilm al-batin. I say the same thing. It is the ocean of knowledge that is externally acquired, and the ocean of knowledge which is internally received. When you harmoniously integrate these two worlds of knowledge, you have the most learned of all men. And we see that in Khidr alayhi salam. We see that in Imam Jalaluddin Rumi, Masnavi, where he's constantly emphasizing the importance of basar. We see that in his student, Dr. Muhammad Iqbal. The beginnings of that model of scholarship is there in Iqbal. Iqbal could not come from a Darul Uloom. The Darul Uloom has its benefit. It has the things which are good in it. But the system of education in the Darul Uloom, number one, is deficient. Number two is defective. And we see that new model of scholarship flowering in Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari. That's why the Deobandis rejected him, and the Brelvis rejected him, and the Ahle Hadith rejected him, and the Salafi and the Wahhabi. Everybody rejected him. And today his star is shining higher than all of them, because you cannot close the doors of the masjid on truth. And I have inherited that model of scholarship from Dr. Iqbal and from Maulana Ansari. So Majma'ul Bahrain is the knowledge, the ocean of knowledge externally acquired. And I attended 5 universities in my life. And the ocean of knowledge internally receive. And these two oceans of knowledge must not exist in separate compartments. No. They must be harmoniously integrated with each other. Then you have the scholar of this age who can respond to the challenges of this age. And the challenges of this age are unique. Never before in human history have you ever had challenges like what you have today. Okay, next question.
Sheikh, it's 25.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Dr. Saab, you see that other verse on the second coming, which the second coming of Isa alayhi salam, there's another verse which they interpret to refer to Isa alayhi salam. I want your take on that Surah An-Nisa, after min ahlil kitab, the next verse. And there's not a single of the people of the book that must believe in him before he's dead. Now they are putting that him as Isa alayhi salam, before Isa alayhi salam's death. How would you, how would you take that?
Because Muhammad Asad, may Allah have mercy on him, because I love that man. I love his scholarship. Oh yes, I honor and respect him, Muhammad Asad, because he made this mountain of a mistake, that Jesus is dead. He had to interpret this verse now. وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ, and there will not be a single one amongst them, the Ahlul Kitab, إِلَّا, but لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ. The language in the Quran is qabl, meaning before his death. There's a world of difference between qabla mauti and hina mauti. Hina mauti means at the time of death. Qabla mauti means before he dies. That every single one of them will have to accept him, meaning accept him as the Messiah before he dies. So whose death is the Quran talking about? Now don't make the mistake of forgetting the difference between hina mauti and qabla mauti. All right? Don't make that mistake. The implication is that every single Jew who has rejected Jesus as the Messiah will have to accept Jesus as the Messiah before his death. So Muhammad Asad now, because he believes that Jesus is already dead, he says, when the Jew is dying, at that time, when there is no evidence for us, he will have to accept Jesus as the Messiah and then die. And my answer to Muhammad Asad and to others who interpret the Quran this reckless way is this is wrong. Because the Quran is saying qabla mauti, not hina mauti. And we don't have the evidence at all to support what is in the Quran. Therefore, this is false. Every single Jew who is dying today dies confirmed that Jesus is not the Messiah. There are no examples of Jews are changing their views at the time of death. None. So Muhammad Asad is wrong on this issue. What the Quran is saying is not when the Jew is dying, rather when Jesus is dying. And therefore Jesus has to come back. And when he comes back, they will have no other alternative I was lecturing at that time when they didn't know my profile. They used to invite me in the synagogue. And I was lecturing in a synagogue in New Jersey, and about 200 Jews packed in that synagogue. And I said to them that when he returns, you will have to accept him as the Messiah. And when you accept him as the Messiah, it will do no good to you, because on Judgment Day he'll give evidence against you and you'll go into the hellfire. When I was finished, they surrounded me. 200 of them surrounded this one solitary man, demanding, why must we be forced to accept what we reject? I said, because at that time the truth will be before your eyes staring at you, and you'll not be able to reject it. And so this is the explanation of that verse of the Quran, that Jesus must return in order for this prophecy to be fulfilled. Jesus must return, and when he returns, before he dies, every Jew will have to accept him as the Messiah. And when they do that, he will give evidence against them on Judgment Day, and they'll go into hellfire. Any more questions?
Sheikh, it's 8:30. It's 8:30 already.
That's it?
Can we?
That's it. Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Okay.